Hi there, thank you for joining me on this AV-8B demonstration video where I'll be covering off the pre-takeoff checks in the Harrier. So I'll go through a few things. I'll go through firstly the pre-takeoff checks in their entirety, which is the one finger checks, the two finger checks and the five finger checks, why they're each important, when you should use them, and then I'll go through a couple of exceptions and differences to the norm, which typically just lie to whether or not you're taking off immediately after the two or five finger checks, or whether or not you're taxiing immediately after, and we'll come back to that in a moment. So firstly, we'll start with the one finger checks, and I'll describe the key differences between each of the one finger checks, although I won't go over some detailed specifics, which I'll point out in a moment. The one finger check is essentially equivalent to the takeoff configuration check in any other aircraft. So say, for example, the Hornet, it might be setting up the takeoff trim, pressing the takeoff button, putting the flaps into the relevant position, whether that's half full, whatever the case may be, and configuring any lights and so on. So the one finger checks generally should be committed from memory. I like to start from the bottom left of my knee and work my way forwards. So starting down here, for a conventional takeoff, we want to make sure that if we are about to enter or entering the runway, we bring the anti-collision lights on. Obviously, they were already on there because this is a hot start aircraft, and DCS sets it up for you. The reason for that is you never want to have your anti-collision lights on when you're not on the runway, because let's say you're on the ramp and something such as an Apache comes to land next to you and they're using their night vision system, your anti-collision light has a great chance of disorientating them. The next thing I do is I'd set my seat height, so however you like it. I tend to move it up a little bit for V-stall operations and then bring it down the rest of the time. And then the actual parts of the one finger checks themselves. So the first thing is stow stop for conventional takeoff should be in the clear. Nozzles should come forward to 10 degrees. So I look over the hood and I bring the nozzles forward to 10 degrees. Okay, next, coming forward, our lights should already be configured. That's not normally part of the one finger check. Our flaps should be in auto for a conventional takeoff. And if you are on the runway, you'll want to turn the nose wheel steering to the anti-skid mode, validated by the cast indication up ahead. If you're not on the runway, if you're going to be taxiing afterwards, you can leave it in the nose wheel steering position. Coming up, we're going to put the combat water on by depressing that little button there. As far as I can discern from the literature online, it appears that the combat water button is on pretty much from takeoff to landing, as it just adds a small amount of water at the peak of the engine limits, just to prevent the engine from being damaged. Takeoff landing water, generally, my rule of thumb is if it's at or below freezing temperature, which is usually around 0 degrees Celsius, depending on the outside air pressure, I leave that off because it is allegedly meant to cause freezing. Whether or not it does in DCS has yet to be seen. My other rule of thumb is if the outside air temperature is above 20 degrees Celsius or in particularly high and heavy, I will turn it on. In this case, I'm going to leave it off, but you obviously have the takeoff, the landing, and the off position. Okay, that's the one finger check for the conventional takeoff. Next, I'll go through the one finger check for the short takeoff. Normally, you'd get the short takeoff information from the VREST, which we have open here, and you can see that it says your nozzle should be set to 60. It can be anywhere from 50 to 60 typically, and it depends on a number of factors. So for the short takeoff, you want to make sure you've done all your data validation correctly, which is covered in the V-stall course, and then go ahead and assign the stow stop as per the instructions of the VREST. If you're doing boat operations, you're doing a short takeoff maritime, the stow stop's always set to 60. So to set that up, I always bring the nozzles all the way back, and then I move the stow stop forward to 60. And the reason I do that is then when I look over the hood, if I've set the stow stop to the right place, it's at 60 and it won't go any further back. And then I set the nozzles to 10. So that's nozzles, and stow stop coming forward, flap should be in the V-stall position generally for a short takeoff. Okay, so that's the short takeoff. For a rolling vertical takeoff, it's a little bit different. So bring the nozzles all the way back again, and now we're going to set them at 70. And we're going to verify that over the hood, and then we're going to reset the nozzles to 30. Check the flaps are in the down position, apply the water as necessary. In this case, it's 29 degrees outside, so it would be on. And for the vertical takeoff, coming back down here, clear the stow stop, set the nozzles to 82 to 84 degrees, make sure the flaps are down, and again, water as desired. In this case, it would be on. Okay, so those are the one finger checks. Next you would do the two finger checks, which truthfully I have not yet committed to memory, but the idea is to commit them to memory so that you are faster with doing them. The reason being, if you are doing them on a designated takeoff area, such as a runway, or maybe it's a road base, or you're on the ship, you need to be quick doing them, and you need to do them efficiently. So the two finger checks and the five finger checks are both power checks that you might do in any other aircraft. Typically, you do them in sort of light aircraft or whenever performance is questionable. It really depends on the aircraft. In the Harrier, we do them. The two finger checks is a power check without the use of water. The five finger check is a power check with the use of water. So I'll demonstrate a one finger check now. So on my right MPCD, I'm going to open up the engine page. And I'm going to follow the instructions here. So throttle is closed, nozzles all the way forward, verify they're at 0. And we need to be in the V-stall master mode for that. Perfect. Combat water press, we've already done that. That's just another check. Engine check. So what we're going to do is we're going to box the XL button over here. We're going to need to hold the brakes and take the parking brake off.
Caution.
We're going to advance the throttle quickly up to its maximum position, and then as the RPM climbs through 60%, we're going to bring it back to hold the RPM at 60%. Whilst the RPM is still held at 60%, we're going to check on the engine page that the 30 to 60% acceleration figure is between 2.4 and 3.1 seconds, and we can see that here. And the inlet guide vanes are between 10 and 21 degrees, and we can see that here. Once we've done that, we'll move on to the nozzles, flaps, and duct checks, which we'll do in a moment. So, holding the brakes, advance the power through to 60%. So, full power there. Allow the RPM to climb. There's 60%. Just bring the power back to hold it at 60. Perfect. So, time was 2.7 seconds. IGBs are at 17, which is within our limits. That's fine. Now, I'm going to demonstrate this as though it's for the conventional takeoff, because that's what you'll be doing in the basic course as part of V1, and later in the V-stall course you'll look at the others. So nozzles, we're going to move momentarily to 50 degrees. We're going to check the flaps are at 62 degrees, which only happens if we've got them in V-stall mode. We're going to check the duct pressure is approximately 45 psi, and then we're going to move the nozzles back to the 10 degree position. So nozzles back to 50, looking over the hood, back to 50, check the flaps are approximately 62, so we'll put those in Stowville. 61, that's fine, we'll put them back to auto because that's what we're going to use them in. Duct pressure, approximately 45 psi, this never reads correctly in DCS, it's at 57 today. and reset the nozzles to 10. The reason you reset the nozzles to 10 is because this check assumes that you will be taking off immediately after, in which case you've done all your checks, nose wheel steering's off, hold the nose wheel steering button, advance the power to full, wait for the skid, release, perform the takeoff. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to demonstrate the 5-finger checks. So we're going to move over to here and assume we're taxiing. So close the throttle, reset the nozzles to 25 to 40 degrees, and make sure your water's off, which it is in this case. Okay, 5-finger checks. Throttle's idle, nozzles are all the way forward. Combat water is pressed. We're going to repeat our engine check. So we're going to box axle, and we're going to advance the power to its forward position, looking for 60 on the RPM there, and bringing it back to hold it at 60. Time was 2.7 seconds again, IGVs are at 17 degrees again, so we are within limits. In this instance, we're going to turn the water into the takeoff position and watch for an RPM rise over the hood. So water in the takeoff position, there's the RPM rise, and we're going to adjust the throttle to maintain 60% with the water on. Now our nozzles, duct, flaps and duct checks. So nozzles will move momentarily to 50 degrees, or to the stow stop, obviously if you're doing a rolling vertical landing or a short takeoff, either land-based or maritime-based. Flaps approximately 62 degrees, so put them down. At 61, that's fine, put them back. Duct pressure approximately 45 to 56. And then reset the nozzles to 10, again assuming that you're going to perform the conventional takeoff immediately after. Obviously in this case we're not, so throttles come to idle, nozzles are going to get moved back to 40 degrees again, and water is going to go to the off position. Okay, so again, to reiterate the differences, if you were taking off, like I've said already, you'd reset the nozzles to whatever the relevant value is for the takeoff, so for the conventional it's 10 degrees. The aircraft should be configured, you're already at about 60%, you'd advance the throttle, you'd perform the takeoff. If you're taxiing, you need to put it back into a safe taxi position, so we close the throttle, obviously, because we don't want to keep using up all that fuel and water. We reset the nozzles to between 25 and 40 degrees for 2 reasons. 1, to avoid further damage to the flaps, and 2, to avoid any FOD debris being blown into the intakes. And then we turn the water off because we don't want to use up all of that water just for taxiing. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch. Thank you.